This is episode 2 of Narrative Wake, a new talk show starring me, Thorin, and co-host Kelsey Moser, who is looking radiant today.
Oh,
absolutely, yeah. Yes. Listen, all the light that shines down upon you is reflected out, much as you take in insight and light from the world and refract it out into society through your work, which, you know, top marks for that. So let's see if this episode fans like you at the end. It's always, listen, it's no one ever knows. It's always up in the air.
Test.
Exactly. No one knows how it'll be at the end. Hashtag Kelsey wins if you like her on this episode, and if it starts trending, then we know she won. Apparently that's the thing, you know. My favourite, by the way, is, you know, on stuff like LCS, where they'll keep updating you, like, oh, look, now that this one team's up 20k gold, all the fans think they're going to win. Like, why did they even update you on that? Like, it's not like the old days, right? You know, in the old days where you would have one of those stupid polls, it's because when you rang into the radio station on the TV, you know, it cost money. I understood that. They're making money. You don't even make money off tweets. Like, LCS doesn't get anything off letting actual cretins, like, go, oh, I think TSM's probably going to win now that Bjergs has got 9-0-4 score. Like, oh, thanks for that insight. So anyway, now that ran, and for some reason, weird, awkward shot across the bow at LCS production is out of the way, we can get to more important things. Like, our guest for this episode is Krepo, but if like you had the wrong aspect ratio settings on your monitor. No, just kidding. He's not, of course. So no, you won't be seeing Krepo on many talk shows from now on, but you might be seeing Moon, because he is an up-and-coming talent within the LCS. Although, actually, I've got to ask about that Moon. So here's the key, right? A lot of people only really take note of someone when they have success and when they really, like, you know, they have the big plays, you know, hashtag LCS big plays, everyone. Again, I'm very focused apparently on the way LCS uses their Twitter. But anyway, so that's when they'll notice it. Okay. So it's easy for people to say, like, oh, I remember seeing him in FlyQuest. They got pretty good, you know, they were making a good run at it last season. But you're not really a rookie, right? You've been playing quite a while now. You've had a few seasons under your belt.
I played on Energy, and I mean, I feel like that doesn't count. Like, I feel like I kind of wiped that from my memory, and I hope everyone else did too.
Listen, Moon. Some people, some experts, actually thought you were going to win that series against Team Liquid many moons ago in the summer season.
I wonder who that might have been.
Remember that one? But, you know.
No chance.
All I'm saying is I believed in you early on, you know. I mean, Kelsey over here, she only hopped on the bandwagon partly to try and spite Dardoch, and then partly because you were winning and you were on FlyQuest. So, you know, she thought, right, time to acknowledge that there's all this good NA talent out there. So obviously, Moon, jungler of FlyQuest. So this episode, yes?
None of that. It was just because he watched LPL occasionally.
I love LPL. I pretty much only watch LPL, actually.
In your early days on NRG, were you really inspired by jungling in LPL?
On NRG?
Yes.
No. On Energy, I mean, I was just fucking bad at that time. Like, I probably watched LCK mainly, but I just feel like watching LPL is more similar to like how NA plays, and it's more similar to my games compared to LCK. LCK is like too good almost. So
funny thing is that people will think we're joking there, but I have actually always said that from like season 3 onwards, especially when they had the era when people had no macro on the Baron. I've always said that China is quite clearly the closest analog to NA. If you look historically how they play, how they stack the teams with different imports, etc., how they just love to, how, like, nearly always the best team in NA LCS is the team that has the best team fighting. It's not the team that macros the map best and has the best shot call. That's actually very rarely the case. Usually the team that just gets into the two good late team fights and wins them most consistently. And that's been the LPL for a long time, sadly.
My favorite,
or positively. I mean, they're specialised in a way, right?
My favorite thing is when you talk to the EU players and they say, well, NA told us that we just, you know, all go mid and we fight around the tower.
Why not, right?
It's just like, LPL's been teaching us that for years. That's good stuff.
Exactly.
All right.
Exactly. So, okay. Obviously, this episode will be primarily focused around the NA LCS. And the timing is pretty good because we have the playoffs coming up. And so we've got these matchups and we know how the bracket's going to go. So actually, before we start the playoffs, I wanted to start with this. In theory, like a lot of sports, you have MVPs, you have awards that are for the regular season. And that's supposed to actually be nothing to do with whether you end up then going on to win the playoffs or whether your team, even if you're number one seed and you fell in the playoffs, that has no ranking over whether you win. So I would ask you this, Moon, if you had to pick someone now, who would your pick for MVP of NA LCS be? Who do you think, just for your own criteria, you don't have to think like what the most fair is or all that, just who for you is the MVP, do you think?
I would have to go with the boring answer of Bjergsen. I feel like personally, whenever I play versus CSM, it's always it's like the hardest thing to do because of Bjergsen. And his team is all really good. Everyone on his team is really solid, but I just feel like something about Bjergsen like motivates his team to do better. So, and I feel like there's no one else that stands out that much to me, unless if I'm missing somebody, maybe.
Okay. By the way, I actually think that's one aspect of a lot of awards voting that I think is a bit unfortunate, which is that especially if you let fans get involved, because it's a cool storyline when someone new wins, people often kind of don't want to let the person who won in the past win. Like what they'll do is if it was even at all close, they'll go, let's go with the guy who hasn't won before. And hence you see sometimes surprise people get. Whereas even though you say they're like the boring pick, you know, there's a reason why if you look at a lot of major sports, the best player often does win multiple MVP awards. You know, it might sound boring, but the reason why Bjergsen is the MVP isn't because he won last season. It's because he might have been the best player again. He might have been the most impactful player again. So, Kelsey, would Bjergsen be your MVP? Have you actually done any content on this yet? Do you have anything planned?
Since I wasn't part of the NA LCS voting this time, I didn't do any content on that. But last split, I think what I said about Bjergsen still holds true, which is that he really enables the map to be open. Like if you watch the way in spring that Svenskeren used to path around Hansard, this would only really work if Bjergsen had pressure mid, and they got so much out of that. So I feel like still, like regardless of where Svenskeren goes, top or bottom, it works pretty much the same way. So I think that it really depends on like whether or not he's able to get a good foothold mid, whether or not their entire side lane focus works.
So when we had recently, there was a video I remember Mark did one about this actually, where some people were trying to like downplay Jensen and say like, oh, he shouldn't be an MVP candidate because he's like a KDA player, and the notion was, perhaps not entirely implausibly, that maybe he plays a little bit too selfishly for himself, you know, and he only kind of goes in when it makes sense. What would you think about Jensen as an MVP candidate? Would he be comparable to Bjergsen this season?
I think so. I mean, the last time we played versus C9, I'm pretty sure I pressed tab at like 15 minutes and Jensen was like 9-0-5 on Syndra. So it seems like every game he's like popping off like insanely well. I think there was a Reddit thread saying that he had like some insane KDA over the past like 2 weeks or something. He's obviously playing like super well, and I think C9 as a team is slumping harder than TSM is as a team, and he's still like shining really well. I wouldn't be like upset if he got it or anything. I think he's also a super good player.
What do you think, Kelsey?
I think the thing about Jensen is a lot of reasons why the criticisms of Jensen came out and why Marks was motivated to make this video is because the damage ratio stat that LCS has come up with, like the damage share, I forget exactly what it's called, where it takes your damage divided by like the damage of everyone who plays that champion. And and his was low. And I feel like a lot of people kind of tunnel visioned on that. I think that overall, like the way the C9 play, Jensen still matters a lot, and a lot of the old narratives about him not roaming, he just like all he does is lane, he doesn't coordinate with his jungler are not true anymore. So I think it's a combination of old narratives and like this damage stat that's come out. I still think that C9 get a lot out of how Jensen played, but I put a lot on the fact that Team Solo mid are like the top of the split again, and Bjergsen is just as fundamental to that team as Jensen is to C9. So,
okay. What do you actually think? Like, one factor I've always found an interesting one when you're trying to contrast people who are MVP candidates is who do you actually think has the better teammates? Like, not better team. I mean, obviously team to some degree, you just go by the record. Who do you think actually had like more help though in that sense between the two, Bjergsen and Jensen? Who would you pick?
What do you mean by more help?
Like who has better teammates? Who has teammates
just better teammates?
More? Yeah. Who would you pick up between the two?
I feel like Contracts and Jensen definitely have. I feel like I always see Contracts around mid lane. I think Contracts actually played like super well this last split. Seems like Bjergsen generally just like does his thing mid, from what I understand. At least the games that we play against him, he just always gets like a slight advantage mid, while Svenskeren does other things. Or Svenskeren uses his advantage mid to like invade me or put pressure on the jungle. Whereas Contracts, it seems like to me, Contracts and Jensen put more pressure on like ganking the enemy mid laner and trying to like blow their summoners and getting kills.
I think I liked that you asked whether it was just better teammates or more help, because the way that I look at it is I feel like in some instances C9 have really, really strong lanes, but they don't necessarily work to bring that pressure to side lane to mid, and then vice versa, as well as TSM do. So I think that that's a good point to bring up. I think that I don't necessarily... It's interesting that you say that you think Contracts puts more pressure on mid instead of the other way around. Because I would say that I think when I've looked at it, it's always like Svenskeren is in mid before Contracts usually in a lot of their matchups. So maybe it's just like this head-to-head that I've seen a lot.
Yeah, I'm mainly just talking about, as I don't watch as much NA LCS as I should, I'm mainly just talking about like at least the games that we play against them. That's how it seems to me.
Okay.
Do the NA LCS teams actually scrim at all comparably to how you end up playing them in the official games? Like if you play someone on week 1 and then 2 weeks later you play them in a match, is it at all the same? Can you take much from that?
Well, I don't think we've scrimmed C9 or TSM in a long time. we're like bottom of the barrel, and they're just like, we're too good for you guys. But yeah, it's actually really comparable a lot of the times, especially when it comes to like champion picks and stuff. If you scrim a team a week before, 2 weeks before, and they're playing, you honestly get to see a lot of information. So sometimes if we scrim a team like 2 weeks before we play it, we'll like be like, okay, let's just play random stuff, or like let's try something new today, to not give them like too much information.
So is that really a thing? Like the idea that if your team drops off and you're not as good in LCS, then you can't get the same level of scrims?
Oh yeah, like the beginning of this season, we were getting like the worst scrims ever, and then we went 6-1. So then for the next like 4 weeks, we had like the best scrims ever, and then we started losing every game, and our scrims got terrible again. So for sure, like good teams scrim good teams, and every now and then you'll get like a scrim set versus a top team. But FlyQuest is also pretty notorious for like shitting the bed in scrims and going like 0-6. So
what do you think the reason for that is?
Just lack of focus in scrims and people trying things out, and honestly, it just comes to lack of focus, I think.
I think it's interesting how no one plays really exactly. When I talk to people, it seems like no one plays really like they do in scrims. They either are way worse and they just goof off in scrims, or they're like scrim gods. Like Nuke Duck is allegedly a scrim god, for example. Yeah. So I think it's kind of funny.
Yeah, we definitely are like probably the worst team in scrims. Okay. It gets pretty demoralizing, and I think most teams hate scrimming us just because a lot of the games are like over in 5-10 minutes. But we're working on it, and like it's gotten better. Right now our schedule is really shitty actually, because there's like 11 teams playing. There's like the 6 playoff teams, then there's the 4 relegation teams, and then there's us, because we still have a chance at Gauntlet. So we're scrimming like every other day or like once every 3 days. We're just getting what we can, and that makes the problem like 10 times worse because people have like 2 off days and then they just go scrim. So right now it's not too productive.
Okay. What do you actually... So obviously a question that is interesting anytime people talk about FlyQuest is like, to what extent do you get a say as the jungler in shot calling that happens? Like, is it like, people have this stereotype from any of the video footage released and a lot of the different teams he was on, that they think that basically Hai just like pilots you all around like an anime, and he's the one controlling all the robots,
Yeah. I mean, during the beginning of the split and probably towards the end of the last split, I feel like Hai was talking less and I was talking more. But recently, or not recently, a few months ago, he said basically that he loses focus if he can't talk so much. And he feels like if he's not talking a shit ton, then he's playing worse, like just mechanically. And that doesn't make any sense to me. Like I was trying to talk more, so I'm like, man, if I talk more and Hai doesn't have to shot call all the time, like he's going to be a fucking god. But he said it's the opposite. So he's doing a lot more of like the early game shot calling and stuff like that. But if anyone has like a really good idea or something like that, like they say it, and Hai is like, okay, yeah, let's do that.
Being as your team has a bunch of players who a lot of people thought were going to retire, obviously the C9 players. People thought, like, maybe they're just going to retire, maybe they're just going to play in less serious capacity. When you did so well last split, this is obviously one of the old stereotypes, the old narratives that people went to. They were like, oh, there we go. Hai obviously just, again, piloted all these guys around. He obviously just shot called them out of every problem. Because, his career's got to a ridiculous level where people think he is like the protagonist of the LCS, and he just overcomes every problem and every solution. To what extent actually do you play like a high-style team? Like, does he really have a lot of say over what happens in the team? Is he a bit more laid back, do you think, than his old days?
Definitely not laid back. He definitely has a lot to say, like, especially outside the game, like in review, he generally takes like control of the review. And like if he says one thing and someone else says another thing, like there's going to be an argument or there's going to be some clashing. I would say there's a lot of like big egos, not egos, but basically like people just want to make sure we're doing the right thing instead of like all just agreeing on something. There's like a lot of arguments back and forth for like no reason. But go ahead.
I don't know. I was just clarifying, so it's not like the stereotype that people have where people have been playing for a long time and they're not like as motivated and they
no,
nothing like that.
There's nothing like that. But I don't know. Hai's definitely like a super good teammate. Honestly, I'm really grateful that I have this opportunity only because of Hai. Like inside of game and outside of game, he's like one of the best people I've ever met. He's like the most extroverted person in the fucking world. And it's changed me a lot as a person. So I don't know. I love Hai.
I think everyone does, mate. I've never heard anyone say a bad word.
Yeah.
When you joined the team, since you were playing with a bunch of people who were in C9 before, did you have any notion that they either had expectations from when they'd had Meteos for so long in the past, or that they wanted you to play particularly in a different way from him? Did they kind of set any ground rules when you came in? This is what type of jungler we need?
When I first joined, I honestly had no idea what the fuck was going on. Like it was like so last minute, and I had been out of competitive for like 4 or 5 months since I lost on TLA. I had like the longest off season ever. I pretty much just joined, and I think everyone kind of let me play how I wanted to play, and they didn't like set any expectations or like put me outside my comfort zone. I think at the time when I first joined, Hai was actually, before we played in LCS, when we were first starting to practice, Hai was actually like kind of micromanaging me, like, okay, hey, take Gromp and then come top. Because I was like really new to the team, and it was kind of like I didn't really know. It had been a long time since I had practiced and stuff. So he was doing that at first, and it was like really nice, and it let me settle in really fast.
Do you think that helped you at all with because you were having some issues in the past or anything like this, or do you think it was just an overall leveling out?
I think it just made me get really comfortable on the team. Like I don't think it probably made me play better just because I was more comfortable. But at first, like joining a team they've all been together for fucking ever, and I'm like the new kid, and I'm young as hell, and prior to that, like people didn't have the best thoughts of me as a player as well. So it really helped me feel really comfortable.
Okay. So Kelsey, since in the aforementioned on episode 1 article regarding Dardoch, you selected Moon as an example of NA talent, which bold words.
Really?
Associating the word NA with talent and not having the word foreign in there or import. So explain this to me, Kelsey. What was different? Why has Moon actually had success on FlyQuest in contrast, do you think, to his past teams? What would your outside analysis be?
I mean, I think a lot of stuff changed. Just part of it is the way that he navigates team fights seems to have improved a little bit in terms of like understanding when to engage. I think that there's been a little bit more freedom in terms of like how he wants to do pathing. It's become less standard. Like if he sees an opening, I think you were one of the first NA junglers who brought like the super leash that they were doing in the East over. So there's just like a lot more thoughtfulness in terms of working on that, I think has helped him a lot. I think the reason why I wanted to use the Moon example is because Moon and Dardoch obviously came up at a similar time period, and Dardoch had a lot of raw talent, and I feel like Moon actually like worked and did something and ended up being in a position where he can be better or as good as Dardoch, because I don't know if Dardoch has improved like considerably since his debut. Like his rate of improvement has been less. So
to follow up on that, I agree. Like, I think on this team compared to Energy, I just feel like everyone has my back. So if I bring up an idea, like the Super Leash I saw in LPL for the first time, and I'm like, oh man, this sounds good for me. Like, can you guys try this? Can we try this out? I think at first they only did it with Malzahar, and at the time we were playing a lot of Malzahar, so I'm like, hell yeah, let's try this out. I tried it on both sides, like starting Wolves with an XP Quint, and everyone was like, all right, yeah, let's try it. And it seems like everyone's willing to sacrifice for me. Compared to other teams, I felt like, and it might be a confidence thing on my end, but it felt like on Energy, for example, I was sacrificing for other people, and they weren't really willing to sacrifice for me.
Okay. Okay, so you briefly alluded there to your time on Team Liquid Academy, but actually to keep the theme going of the infamous article at this point in time, when you were...
It's really bothered you.
I know, it does, doesn't it? So when you were on Team Liquid Academy, you briefly got a call.
Oh, no.
It was like a movie, you know. Oh,
yeah.
Wait,
no, it was.
we need to call you up to the majors. We need, this guy's out of control. We gotta bring in the young talent. So here's the thing, Moon. You could have ended all this Dardoch shit forever. You could have been the guy who just came in, won the matches. Then Dardoch would have had to learn a lesson. Like, if I want to get back on the starting spot, I've got to change my attitude. But instead, you came in, game one. The next thing you know, they're like, Steve's like, Dardoch, get the fuck in there, please.
Actually,
I'll do anything.
You're unbanned.
It was bad, wasn't it? That was the most ridiculous. Like, they just acquiesced instantly. They didn't even give you 2 games. What was that?
Oh man, that was a fucking horror story, man. Like, I was playing on TLA and I really loved TLA, and then suddenly I got like pulled into the room. They're like, "Yo, Moon, we booked you a flight to go to Korea. You're leaving in like 2 days. Like, the main team has problems, blah blah blah." And I'm like, "Oh, what the hell?" Like, yeah. I was against it because I really enjoyed the team atmosphere of TLA, and I didn't want to go into a toxic environment and felt like I had nothing to win by doing that. And I guess I had some confidence issues still at the time. I felt like I was a good player, but replacing Dardoch, like Dardoch is obviously a really good player. That ended up getting canceled out. They ended up using a different jungle sub in Korea, so I ended up not going there. But then once they came back, they ended up needing me for the main team. I had like 2 days of scrims. One was without Piglet and one was with Piglet. And then, I don't know, I just went on stage. I just felt like I had nothing to win, so I was super nervous going into the first game. And I don't blame them at all for putting in Dardoch. I definitely played terribly, so. Did you
actually, like beyond the results, did you actually play the way you would normally play? Did you try to do the things you would do? Did the nerves like affect, do you think, the decisions you made in game?
For sure. That's how I always used to be, is I would go on stage and I would just like overthink everything, and like I wouldn't play how I wanted to play. And that was always like my problem on Energy and when I played on TL. But it's just fixed now. I don't really know what happened exactly, but I just feel like I go on stage and I'm confident and I know what I want to do, and I do it.
So if you go back to the high narrative, right, and we really want to force it, we say that like you stopped having to think, and then it just naturally from there it evolved. So exactly. You stopped thinking, period. And even though you're making your own decisions, you're really just not thinking about it.
Well, no, the joke there would be that High is such a good shot caller. He makes people think that they had the idea, and then they're like, "Oh, I did it," and they were like, "Yeah." He's like, "You're really improving, you come along leaps and bounds,
He plants the idea in your head like 3 minutes ago.
That day when you saw the Super Leash in LPL, you were really just sitting down to your monitor. You didn't know why LPL was on. It was just on. Your computer, for some reason, had already started, and I had the VOD booted up.
Yeah.
When you actually had that playoff run last season with FlyQuest, a lot of people at the beginning of the split saw the lineup and were like, "Oh, this team will be terrible." In fact, I think Monty actually tweeted some infamous line like they will be in relegation, and people now are retweeting that as though like, "Oh, look, he's a prophet." It's like, he isn't though, is he? First of all, it's a different player in the team, and that was like a split ago. Obviously, you actually, you were in the semi-finals. So what did you actually make of that first split with them? Like, what expectations did you come in? Because like I said, if you're coming in and you don't know the players yet, it would actually be reasonable as an outsider to think, are some of these guys just doing it because they just want to play a bit? Do they want to play for fun? Or do they want to just make money, It's hard to know with players like that, where a bunch of them could have retired and some of them were kind of at career lows. Where are they? Have they got the drive? You might be thinking, what was the expectations, do you think, for the first split?
Like I said before, I was like a very last minute addition, like 2 hours before the roster lock. It was like a 12-hour conversation. They were debating between me and someone else. So going into it, I had no expectations. I was like, honestly, I'm signing. I'm grateful to be on a team, because other than that, I probably would have been playing on some mediocre challenger team. So I was like, I'm going to play in LCS. I want to prove myself as a player and try to change people's opinions of me. But then we had the amazing start where we went 6-0 and then played the super hype match for C9. And after that, I think everyone's expectations of us as a team changed. But that's when we started shooting the bed. So
okay.
I don't know. We had such a good start to the split, and then we fell off super hard, and then we ended the split all right. Ended up reverse sweeping CLG and getting 4th in playoffs, which is definitely a lot better than I expected. When I signed to the team, for sure.
So, to reference again the article that Kelsey wrote about NA talent, it has been a trend over the last, let's say, 2 to 3, if we're talking about all the talent. The amount of jungle talent in NA, and particularly NA jungle talent, has just grown split by split by split. What do you actually think of the junglers in NA at the moment? Who are the ones who stand out to you? Who's deserving of the hype?
I think xMithi is the best right now.
For what reason, though?
I just think plays really solid. I think he's super consistent. That's pretty much it, to be honest. I don't think he's super flashy or anything. I just think he's the most consistent jungler ever. I don't know.
Did you see anything different out of him since he was on Immortals than when he was on CLG? Do you think he plays any differently or does anything differently?
I think he might play he plays probably pretty similarly, but it might mesh well with it might be better, or a better style of playing with his current teammates.
I think there was a theory that I heard recently, which is that Smithy has always kind of been a smart jungler, but he's always had trouble kind of vocalizing what he's doing, if that makes sense. He knows what he's doing in the game and how to do it, and it makes sense to me, because when I watch him, he reacts really well to information. So it's not necessarily he goes in with a set plan and doesn't change it. But that on the team environment on Immortals, the way that the staff was set up and the team was set up and the communication system was set up, he's able to kind of articulate what he wants the team to do and what he wants to do a little bit better in games. So I think that that's an interesting theory as to why Smithy is playing really well this split.
I think just changing environments like that can make someone a lot better too. Just make them reignite the fire inside them.
You would also think, if you just speculate, if you're playing with Flame, who obviously has still fairly minimal English, especially in a high pressure situation like a game, you're going to have to actually vocalize more. You're going to have to take more of a role in saying what you're doing, etc. Whereas if you contrast that with someone like Zion Spartan, I know people want to call him Darshan, but it'll always be Zion Spartan to me and his teacher. So when you talk about a player like that, you have to realize he actually himself used to be a shot caller at one point in time. They had a whole bunch of players in that team who had history doing that role, So as a result, you can sometimes take for granted, I don't want to step on people's toes here, Whereas I actually think sometimes in some of these teams, especially the ones with the Korean imports, it's better if you just take the assumption, everyone who's not the Korean basically has to be talking quite a lot of the time so that they can just take in the information and give out the necessary info,
Mm-hmm.
That's been my theory, at least. So what do you actually think about people who wanted to put xMithi forwards as an MVP candidate himself this split? Because obviously Immortals' actual level in the league has been much higher than we've seen overall in past splits, and he's been clearly the addition to the team. Now, obviously, other people have played well within it. I have to say, though, one thing to tie into that question, though, is it does feel like it's tricky to give junglers MVP awards, because compared to a lot of the other roles, it's hard to kind of see if that guy's just excelling individually, contrasted with the other junglers, for example. What do you think of xMithi as potential candidate?
Yeah, I pretty much agree with you. It's really hard to judge a jungler's skill, especially in a meta like this where it's mainly tank junglers, and the difference between a good jungler and a small jungler are a lot of really small things that they do. And it's hard to notice that. So I think xMithi is probably the best jungler or the most consistent, but I personally wouldn't vote for him for MVP.
I think the interesting thing about Immortals is that it's hard to give someone on Immortals an MVP because the other name that I've heard a lot is Ola. And I think that's a tricky one because, I mean, a lot of people, like, the narrative is that Immortals don't do well if he's not on a playmaking champion. But if they have a lot of lane pressure, that works as well. And it's just, for me, it's the way that the team has been working with information has been really good. And I don't know if, like, anyone stands out as a super big MVP of the team. I do think, actually, I have kind of a weird opinion on whether or not, on how to judge junglers, but I think it's because I overrate decision making and pathing decision. So I end up in positions where, okay, this makes sense to me, but I might not even know exactly why he's doing it. And then also, like, I don't rate as well things like, and I end up in weird positions in my head where, okay, like, this guy still finds a way to get ahead and move around these wards, even when mid is, like, constantly losing. And I rate that super highly in my head, but I don't necessarily know if he's going to do really well if mid is, like, always winning, and he's going to do really well with these types of advantages. So there are a lot of different things that junglers can be good at, and I think that's the more challenging thing because of the way the team dynamic is set up. You don't necessarily always know if they can do all of those different things.
Okay. How about this, the Moon? How do you actually rate junglers in terms of criteria? Because obviously, even if you say things like the meta is influential, etc., in your own head you must have some kind of criteria, some kind of sense for what you think, like how you can kind of identify if this guy is doing well beyond just that his team wins the game. So what matters to you?
For me, I rate junglers by how their team is doing. Honestly, like, if a team is doing really well, I assume the jungler is probably pretty good. But how I rate them kind of more individually is how I feel playing versus them. Like, if they put pressure on me. Honestly, I feel like if a jungler, in scrims at least, if a jungler gets, like, a bunch of kills ganking, I'm like, okay, well, that's my team's fault. Like, they shouldn't be dying to those ganks. Like, they're playing I'm like, okay, their jungler's bot side, and then bot will take a fight and die to the gank. And I'm like, okay, well, that shouldn't happen. That won't happen on stage. But if a jungler, for example, Chaser, he's not playing on Dignitas anymore, but when he was in NA, he was constantly putting pressure on me. Like, I always felt like I had to do something different or something, like, creative to just secure my own camps. Otherwise, he would be invading me, like, trying to kill me and take my stuff. So Lear is another good example of that now. Like, Lear, I feel like when I play versus him, I'm always super pressured. So I kind of rate on a more individual level junglers that way.
Okay. What did you actually think of Chaser when he was in the NA LCS? Because he's someone who had a very interesting story, in as much as many moons ago, he used to play with a fellow called GBM. I know you're probably not that familiar. You know, he wasn't really anything good. Don't worry about me. But people used to think he was good. You know, 2015 we're talking about here. And famously at the time, Chaser, funny we're bringing up this discussion of how tough it is to rate junglers, because he used to get basically credit for exactly the reasons Kelsey's saying, which was he was on a team where there weren't really many kind of like star players, and the team itself had really no business, you know, competing with the best teams in LCK, but they would, and they were famously the team who kind of took, you know, the moral victories, like, oh, we lost a close 2-1 game, you know, and you'd look at him and you'd go, wow, he's doing really well considering he hasn't kind of got superstar laners and he isn't on a great team. And so in an era when there weren't actually that many kind of star junglers, a lot of people actually kind of had him as kind of like the uncrowned best jungler at the time. And so people would have thought, as they always do when someone who was once a star in Asia comes to the West, that, you know, people instantly assume or perhaps just hope, oh, he's going to smash all these people in NA, you know, haha, he's going to wreck everyone. And obviously it was kind of a bit underwhelming on Dignitas, right? I mean, you're saying here in scrims, you know, whatever, it felt like he played well against you or pressured you a lot, but there was some kind of disconnect. What did you think of him when he was actually in Dignitas in LCS?
Well, I think the first split seems like they just had a lot of communication problems. Like, I specifically remember the first time we played against them. I was playing Rengar, and their bot lane was like 300 health. And he was just like, I went to dive bottom. We had a Shen. So Shen ulted me, and I dove bottom, and the game was over. And meanwhile, Chaser was just trying to like gank for Sunday and doing nothing and like doing like 200 damage to our Shen. Seemed like at first they had a lot of communication problems, but honestly, I feel like throughout the split, like he improved a lot, and I think he started playing really well. But I'm also pretty biased because I've been like a Chaser fanboy forever.
Okay.
So when he was like the storyline that you're talking about, when he was like the best jungler in LCK, I was like not a pro, and I was just like a fan. Oh. So I fucking loved Chaser. Like, he was like my favorite person ever.
Okay.
So
Then in that case, you have now forced me to ask this follow-up question, which is, if you yourself played with GBM after that, did you have the expectation, like, I have to play Chaser style? Because, that was one of the things that people criticised NRG about. They used to say as the jungler didn't really fit the team as well.
I didn't feel like I had to play Chaser style, but always in the back of my mind, I was like, oh, fuck, like, I'm replacing Chaser for GBM. Like, this is going to be hard. So.
Okay. What did you think of Chaser and Dignitas, Kelsey?
I think I wouldn't necessarily say... I think that Dignitas relied way too much on getting someday ahead to the point where they would just kind of do these really predictable ganks, and then they would overcommit to the top lane play, and sometimes this would force them to make mistakes, and then they would get behind actually trying to get someday ahead. I don't know if the shift I think the shift was less like an over-reliance on someday and more of an ability to have better communication, like you said, so that they could actually play with other lanes as well and use advantages in other lanes, because I feel like there's often a divide on teams where you're importing top and jungle, and then so like the map is split up in this way. So I think that was part of the issue.
I mean, one of the reasons actually to tie back into the reason why when Dardoch was playing very well, I thought he was like the most valuable player, is because when you consider those teams, since you can import 2 players, and typically if you can, people want those imports to be Koreans, ideally to me, you probably don't want the jungler to be a full-on Korean who doesn't have any experience, traditionally speaking English in his culture. Like, it's one thing if they, spent time here or they have a degree in English or something. Yeah, that would be different. But I actually have an addendum to that, which is I do think it can work, but I feel like Dignitas is a good example of where if you're going to have a jungler who's a full-on Korean, I think the coach should be Korean as well. I think that would probably be the best bridge between the two, So then at least the coach has direct communication with the player, can go into all the nitty-gritty of exactly why you break something down this way or that way, etc. And I think that's actually a flaw, is like, I don't know what they were like, how they thought they could have like Americans be the coach of Chaser if he's just full-on.
Originally they had Korean coaches.
Yeah, they had a Korean coach, and then they were losing everything.
I actually have good story about who that guy, one of the Korean coaches was. He was on 2015 OMG, which everyone concedes was a train wreck. And then he was on Spenu in 2016. And so I look at this guy's history and I'm just like, how is he still getting jobs? Like, what is he doing? Okay.
So he was just one of those mystery pickups.
Yeah. They had another coach who didn't have nearly as bad of a track record. So maybe he was like a hangers-on assistant or something like that.
Yeah. So who else would you pick? I mean, you said Chaser there in terms of your own personal metric. Are there other ones who in the current field that stand out?
Lyra, for sure. Lyra is like the now version of Chaser. I think Lyra is
even in terms of the storyline, right? Because it's like, oh, his team sucks, but he's fucking amazing. Oh, imagine if he was on a good team,
But Lyra is like pretty much regarded as like one of the best junglers in NA. I would say other than Lyra, no one really stands out to me as like in your face, like constantly making me feel pressured. Everyone else is like really consistent though, like Svenskar and Smithy, Contracts. They're all like super good junglers, but they're just more consistent. I feel like they don't do a lot of like super creative stuff.
Okay. Who would you put, Kelsey? Presumably you have some other names you would add.
I mean, of the really good junglers, I guess, yeah. I think Smithy would also be my number one right now. I don't know, actually. Lyra's been really good, but there are just moments where I feel like MV don't play to strong side as well, or they don't take swap opportunities, and part of that is like a flaw in the early game. But I don't know if that's Lyra's fault. So yeah, I guess Lyra and then Smithy. After that, oh my god, it's not on the list.
Wait a minute. Even though they're in the playoffs now, well, Kelsey, you surely don't think Envious is actually a good team.
Envy? Yeah. No, I don't think they're good. But I'm thinking about junglers, and I think Lyra is good. Scaren's fine. I wouldn't actually put Svenskeren on the list of top junglers. I think he's reasonable, but he's just like really reliable, and TSM get a lot out of mid pressure, as we said. But I think Contracts is decent, yeah. I mean, for me, the thing about NA junglers right now is that there are a lot of good, talented players, but I think NA just knows NA teams know how to use their junglers better. Which is why, like, you're seeing people talk much more about NA junglers, and then in EU, people are talking much less about EU junglers than they have in the past, because I feel like right now, NA knows how to use their junglers way better in terms of, like, if the lane is pushing, can the jungler invade? If you have 2 lanes pushing, can you reinforce this with vision in the river? Are you denying the camps properly when these types of situations are up? Like, is mid feeling pressured? Like, are you taking Rift Herald when you have an immobile mid laner and using that to pressure the enemy mid tower? And then, like, are you working with the jungler in these sorts of aspects? In some cases, like, I think NA forcing fights over dragons more is a big thing, and junglers often set that up. So I don't know. Like, for me, I think it's just getting the jungler more involved with the rest of the team. Instead of, like, some of the best junglers in EU, I would say, are good because they're doing smart things to stay ahead of the enemy jungler when their mid lane is losing. Yeah. So it's like, or the junglers in EU, I would say, are good because they're able to ward the flanks of lane, and then they don't necessarily follow up on them. They know where the enemy jungler is, but they're not punishing him for being there. So there are just like a lot more gaps, because when you know where the enemy jungler is and you can't punish them, it's often a failing of like communicating with your lane, right? It's like, oh, okay, this guy is here, so we should either play to this side and we should get this invade, or we should make this roam. And I just feel like there's a lot less of that in EU. So that's why I think that NA junglers are looking better. And it's like, is this an individual talent thing? So it's, again, an entire team issue that's making NA junglers look really, really good right now. So.
Okay. What do you think about that, Moon?
I don't know. I actually don't watch any EU games at all. Okay. I never watch EU. So.
Do you feel as though in NA, though, in general, like, if excluding rare examples in the case, like, are really extreme, do you think that each jungler, like, fits the team pretty well, and the team has a concept as to how he should use? Do you think players have much kind of individual say as to what they do in NA?
Honestly, I just feel like the junglers in NA are really good, and yeah, I think the junglers in NA have a lot of freedom and of like, okay, I like this champion, I want to play this champion, or here's my style, let's play around it. I think the teams in NA, I don't know how it is in other regions, but I think the teams in NA play around that a lot.
So that's interesting, because actually, whenever I've watched the EU teams over the last, like, 2 years, basically the era when, like, Trick was in G2, and then obviously, like, Jankos has been there the whole time and is always a prevalent figure at the top. It does feel like the best junglers in EU have a massive amount of freedom as to what they do in the game. Like, basically, no one sort of tells them, no one micromanages them at any time. It's more like they either ask the laner, like, can I come gank here, if they want to set something up. It seems like it's their initiative to what they're going to do at that point in time. Hence why when you get a setup where, like, a top laner and a jungler, or a mid laner and jungler are like a really good partnership, they tend to just ride those out forever. You know, they just stick with that part, and you'll see him just gank for that lane over and over again. You know, because he has good kind of rapport there. That just makes me wonder if they coach differently, because obviously EU to some degree still fairly mid-centric, right, Kelsey?
Yeah, it's still fairly mid-centric. I think part of it, though, is that, like, generally in terms of playing with the jungler, it evolved a little bit more. Because, for example, like, my big thing with G2 last year was that they didn't necessarily, jungle and support didn't really time their backs together very well, or anything like this. And there wasn't a lot of coordination in that respect. So I think Trick, yeah, he got a ridiculous amount of freedom. But it was more like, let's do this back and make this play bottom. And he would say, no, I'm going to farm this top camp instead, right? So it was like a lot more disconnect with the jungler and the team. And the jungler had a lot of freedom to do stuff that he wanted to do. And because the other junglers were doing kind of the same thing, there wasn't really like an effort to work with the team and punish the jungler for being out of position or anything of that nature. And I think the one team that actually does it really well and still does it really well is H2K, because you brought up Jankos. And like whenever Jankos is going to gank Odo now, and this was something they really struggled with last spring, but whenever Jankos goes to gank Odo. Like Odo always has the wave like prepped or like stacking so that they could do a dive if they're going to do a dive or something like that. So I think that's like Jankos for me is like way above right now in terms of if you rate junglers on how they're working with their team and how their team's working around them. I think Jankos is like way above every other jungler in EU right now. And then the rest is kind of like, okay, you make nitpicky arguments about which jungler you want to give second and third to, put it in a package, and we're good to go. Let's go.
Okay. Right, let's actually jump into the playoff brackets and see how these teams actually match up against each other. So in the first quarterfinal, we have Cloud9 playing against Dignitas. Now, as you've referenced already, Dignitas, they've rotated people in and out of the lineup. Probably a team most people aren't expecting to be that good because Cloud9, at least historically, are always going deep in the playoffs. What do you actually make of Dignitas' chances, Moon? Can they make this competitive? Can they win the series, do you think? Is that reasonable?
I think Dignitas looked super good towards the end of the split once they put in my boy Altec and Adrian. It seemed like they completely changed as a team, like a complete 180. I think C9 was also looking pretty bad, except for Jensen. Jensen was like the shining star on C9. But obviously C9 playoff buff. I would say C9 is going to take it. But it'll be like a pretty close series, I think.
Okay. Yeah, for me, I think the thing about Dignitas that was really impressive was how quickly they kind of figured out champion priority on new patches. So I thought that was really cool to see. But yeah, I feel like these quarterfinals are going to be closer than last split. I don't know how you feel about that, Moon.
Well, last split for us was pretty close for CLG.
Yeah, fair enough.
And I'm also hoping CLG stomps Envy. We need Envy to lose for our gauntlet chances. So, but yeah, I think C9 versus Dig will be pretty close.
Do you think it will be close, Kelsey? Come on.
C9 versus Dig. I mean, I think that again, Dig got a huge buff from figuring out this kind of patch where I feel like C9 and TSM were both kind of slow. So you saw Dig make that huge uptick where they were winning games and TSM were picking like Xerath.
What do you think was break it down a little bit. What did they figure out? Do you think that's worked for them?
Like they were doing the engage stuff really early, like the Maokai priority. They were picking like the Sivir Janna comps and stuff like this that was maybe even a week in advance of when people were figuring out the Sivir Janna comps. So I think that was something that they worked really well on. I think that TSM in particular have kind of caught up, C9 have kind of caught up, and this meta works really, really well for C9 actually because they'll win their lanes and then they'll win the team fight and they're playing much more with impact. And I think this suits him really well to come in and do the TP flank and win the team fight. Yay, hooray. So I do think that C9 are definitely pretty favored here. But I think that maybe because 7.16, with 7.16 targeting mid laners most often, I think you have to give the advantage to Jensen. So I don't even think that this patch is necessarily going to be a big advantage. A patch change is going to be an advantage for them in this case.
How do you think the two junglers match up on this particular patch in this meta, Moon? Like, what do you think? Is it better in a different meta for Contract? Is this going to suit him? How's Shrimp going to do? What do you think?
I feel like this meta, I don't really know exactly what people are playing because we're, like I said, we're kind of like on and off with our practice. But I think if the meta is similar to what it was before, it's better for Shrimp. I feel like Contracts is a better, like, I don't know, people are starting to play Rek'Sai. I feel like Contracts' Rek'Sai is super good and he's more of like an aggressive jungler, whereas Shrimp I most often see on like Nunu or Gragas or something like that. Maokai. I think Shrimp is more consistent on the tank junglers, whereas Contracts wants to gank and be in your face.
Okay.
I think it's interesting because I feel like you can play like a lot of these aggressive junglers, but it doesn't work with overall how C9 as a team seem to be wanting to play these patches.
Yeah.
So I think that's...
Well, I think right now pretty much every jungler is just playing tank junglers. Like there's not really... I tried to play Rengar and it kind of worked early and then we'd start team fighting and we would just lose every fight because I'm a Rengar. So it seems like every jungler is kind of just playing like Maokai, Gragas, Sejuani, stuff like that.
I think it depends because I think you can still get away with the Elise and stuff like this.
Oh yeah, well Elise is like super strong, but she's banned most of the time. Or I don't know.
There's more Rek'Sai being played, like you said.
Yeah,
so.
Rek'Sai like appeared a bunch, and then everybody stopped playing her for like 3 weeks, and then now she's coming back for some. I don't know what the fuck happened.
I definitely wouldn't put Rengar on the list.
I wouldn't either.
I think there are some people who would play. I think someone was playing Rengar in LPL the other day. It was weird. But I think Elise, Rek'Sai. I mean, I guess Maokai is a tank jungler, but he's also kind of an early jungler.
Zach. Some teams aren't playing Zach anymore, but I think Zach is still super OP. Like in relegations, at least. I was watching the relegation games at the studio the past few days, and there are multiple games where Zach was just left through pickman entirely, and that was like really shocking to me.
I think Zach is still really good. I mean, I guess if you're Unicorns of Love, you play Poppy into it.
I've actually seen like a decent amount of Poppy jungle lately.
Yeah, it's because of Xerxes. Unicorns of Love, he played Poppy jungle into Zach, and they beat H2K, so that's probably why.
I mean, it is his mantle as a Unicorns of Love jungler. He's actually contractually obliged to do shit like that every now and then. Like, play stuff that isn't even a jungle champion, and then be like, haha, it was my plan all along.
I feel like Xerxes is worse. Xerxes is worse, though. He actually just like actively finds more shit to play.
Yeah.
So in some ways, he's like the Keen of jungle, because whereas Power of Evil actually used to innovate things and do new picks that would be good in mid lane, Keen would just pick things in the mid lane, and then when they didn't work, would be like, well, experiments fail, throw that one out on the heap with all the other corpses of the other champions I tried to play. Okay, so I don't actually buy that this one's going to be closest to series, especially because I actually feel like one area where it's really worrying for Dignitas is they don't really have any experience doing anything in playoffs, So I always feel like it's a bit depressing, but there is nearly always the storyline where one team does like well in the regular split, and you're like, oh, maybe they could. Oh no, wait, yeah, it's actually hard to win best of 5 series. Yeah, they lost, and as boring as it is, C9 they have battle-tested players. They have a team that's played in playoffs before. Every lane, in theory, is comfortable. I don't think anyone's going to choke in this series. So I think Dignitas will have to play fucking amazing to win this one. So I think I'm going to take Cloud9 to win this one comfortably. And because also, here's the thing. For someone like Jensen, he has to get his heart broken later in the tournament. It's no fun if he just loses here. No one's going to cry or get emotional over this game. He's got to get to the finals or the semi-final, and then he's got to be in a moment where he could win the whole game, and then he's got to not win the moment, because that's just the way it goes, That's life. That's actually a metaphor for everyone's life. I know people like Bjergsen are like, no, and then you win again, and then you keep winning again.
And then no, actually,
you are the 0.0001% Bjergsen. For the rest of us, we usually all lose in our biggest moments. That's just life. That's just the way it goes. But you keep trying. You keep trying, right, Moon?
Yeah, you're so motivational.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, never give up.
Never give up. Never give up. Not even in the face of apocalypse, as a hero of mine once said. Right, what about the other one then? So Envious is playing against CLG. Now, the obvious, I think, topic we have to discuss first of all is that since CLG kicked out Dardoch and they've had to bring in Oh My God, that seems like a defining characteristic here, because no matter what you think about CLG's team, you have to ask how are they going to play with Oh My God. And again, he's someone who pretty inexperienced. I mean, hasn't even played much this split. So what do you make of the CLG in the Oh My God era, Moon?
And he's playing versus Lyra. So
yeah, there is that as well, right?
It's a really big wildcard matchup. I think CLG, if they had Dardoch or a more experienced jungle, they would take the series like 90%. I think Envy started playing really bad towards the end of the split. But Lyra can, I think, carry games like single-handedly. And I'm worried that he's going to do that. I'm really worried that he's going to do that. But I honestly think Oh My God is really good for a rookie jungler. He just doesn't have the experience that he needs right now.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about CLG is that they might like try to do a few cute things. Maybe they're one of the NA teams that actually like try to swap sometimes before they take Dragon, or so they might try to kind of throw Lyra off in that sense, or make it harder for him to just like really pressure Oh My God or dive bottom or something that like some of these really predictable plays with pushing lanes that Envy like to do.
Yeah.
So I think that that's something that CLG could win off of, and I don't necessarily think that. Like, I still want to say CLG win this, right? But it becomes harder to do if you don't think that MB are going to just like splinter apart after laning phase, which they tend to do anyway. But if, like, I do think that they can actually get big enough leads to close out in this series, which is like the worrying thing.
Yeah, I'm hoping CLG wins. I would say it's like 65-35 in advantage of CLG. But if Lyra shows up, I think CLG will lose.
Because the thing is, I mean, when you look at this particular series, I wouldn't even blame Oh My God if he had issues here. He's not only inexperienced himself competitively, but it's not even like he's had a whole split in the team. It's not like he's had all the time. And again, it has to be in the back of his mind. He wasn't the first choice, you know. He was just brought up last minute, and he's just had to make the best of it. So, as well as he's done there, yeah, like we say, it's very much a baptism of fire that you're going against someone who many people consider one of the best junglers, and particularly best jungler at just basically like raw carrying the game. Like, when I look at Lyra right now, this reminds me of when Rush used to be on those tip teams, and you were like, it doesn't matter who's not on the team or what's going wrong. Any game, he could just go off and win the whole game for you, you know, or at least at the very least give you a big lead, you know, get those few early kills and there's a chance. With that said, though, along similar lines, I have predicted many an incorrect series for Tip to win for exactly that reason. I was like, oh, all he has to do is do like 3 out of 5 games. That's doable. He can do it. And then it was just like some Sisyphean task of him just like, oh, I've got the 3 kills. No, we still lost the game anyway. Well, as they say, Moon, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And you can gank for a lane as many times as you want, but you can't make that laner use that advantage and win the game. That's just the curse of being a jungler, I believe, you know? That's the problem. So that's the problem with this series, isn't it? It just feels like CLG should win, you know, if everything goes according to plan. Like, if both teams just play a boring game, CLG probably should win. They're probably still good enough even without Oh My God. The real question, I guess, is if CLG was to win this, do they actually have any chance when they go further in the tournament? They would be on, let me see, well, they'd be reseeding. So let me think, what seed were they? They were the 3rd seed, so they would presumably play against Immortals.
They would play, Immortals rather than TSM.
So if they win, they would get to play Immortal. Would they actually have a chance against Immortals?
I think Immortals would beat CLG pretty well based on the last week's performances. So yeah, I don't really think that they do. Like, the more I think about it, though, the less chance I think MB have. Just because I do think also, if you're going to give Oh My God some question marks for being a rookie, you have to give Niski some question marks for being a rookie. And even though Niski has had like really good breakout performances in NA LCS, I think that overall, like, his career in EU was really hit or miss.
Yes. And
I don't know. I don't feel like super confident in Niski having consistent form either. So like keeping the mid lane pressure that you need for MBS to succeed is going to be difficult, and Lyra to succeed is going to be difficult.
See, the funny thing is, that just brings me back again to my infamous Team Liquid versus NRG prediction, where one of my lines of reasoning was that Team Liquid had more rookies, therefore, you know, there's more chance that there's going to be a choke. In fact, I was essentially trying to, like, do some sort of weird equivalent of shorting the stock market, but against players. Like, I'm not, like, you know, I wasn't hoping for the better thing, like, they're going to succeed. I'm actually hoping they fail, you know. I'm like, come on, there's 3. I wish I could go in there and give the speech, you know, come on, there's 3 of you, come on, it's a lot of pressure on there, the lights, they're real hot, you know. Can you all make it? Some of you will probably crack under the pressure.
Did you actually think TL or NRG would win?
Yes, he did.
Yeah, but really? Here's the thing. You have to realize that was where, like, their entire... That was the first split, remember?
He had an entire video on it.
Yeah, I did. I had a whole video on it. Like, what a quick summary would be basically... Well, first of all, I did say some silly things. Like, I said the difference between Moon and Dardoch wouldn't be that big, you know. Listen, I was young,
you said some
I was
silly
naive.
things for sure.
Yeah, I know. I also said... But the other one was, I did say that, like, since they had 3 rookies, you have to remember, on Team Liquid, I thought there was a decent chance like at least one of them would choke, you know. And especially like I thought if like the most obvious one would be if it's either Dardoch or Matt, I thought that kills them right there, because if Dardoch fails, well, the jungler's gone. And then the worst one probably actually is Matt, because Piglet was like the star of the team, you know. So I thought, come on, I only need one of these guys to fail in, not even in the whole series. Just give me a couple of games. Come on. And little did I know, I was just a few months ahead of my time, you know. Dardoch himself could destroy an entire team and their chance of winning any series. So what happened was, you know, whenever you see TV shows and science fiction movies where they can see into the future, it's always a bit hazy, you know. They see images, so they think, oh, I know what that is. There's going to be a guy there, but that might actually be like, you know, 3 months in the future. So I was just off by a little bit. And one last point I will say, I wasn't ridiculous. I didn't say like NRG's definitely going to win. So like NRG will win a narrow 3-2 series.
I think my favorite part of that video though is that it felt like watching it, you were trying to convince yourself that this was going to happen while you were making the argument. It was pretty good.
I was making an epic call. And listen, here's the thing, right? I actually had nothing to lose, because when it was wrong, well, loads of people think I'm an idiot and don't know what I'm talking about anyway. I don't lose. My stock didn't go down at all. But tell you what, if I'd been right, if any of that stuff, any of it, I mean, none of it happened, by the way, but if any of it had happened, would have looked epic. I would have been one man who stood against the crowd.
That was definitely the most depressing best of 5 I've ever played in my life. That was like the worst best of 5 I've played in my life.
I mean, I have heard some stories. I knew some people who were close to that NRG team. I've heard some mad stories about that team, mate. And I know a lot of them probably can't come out, but one day, I hope that League is still big enough that the truth comes out about some of the players in that team, some of the personalities, some of the wacky things that people did. Because that team is like people will think I'm just meaning like, you know, people weren't good in the game. No, there was some mental extracurricular stuff with that team, right, Moon?
I don't know what you're talking about specifically,
exactly,
but there's definitely some interesting things on Energy.
Yes, there would be some great stories. Put it this way, it's those stories where you say, oh, we'll all look back and laugh on this one day, because at the time, they're incredibly depressing and destroy everyone's morale. So, enough about those. Better times now, Moon. You're on FlyQuest, mate.
Yeah,
everyone loves you now. Your team actually respects and appreciates you. And there's a future for all of you. So, different times now. Don't worry about that. Now, Kelsey, what do you actually think in terms of this playoff bracket?
Yes.
Do you actually think, bearing in mind, if CLG wins and C9 wins, and C9 therefore has to immediately play against TSM, like they just basically have to play what would be sort of the final most times around we'd expect, is this C9 team actually good enough to win LCS? Bearing in mind, just one caveat, they do obviously get, you know, there's like, it's not like the old LCS where you just played it all over a weekend, you know. You have time to prepare for series. In theory, if you can figure out what your problems were, you maybe could overcome. Could they be good enough to win LCS this time?
I don't think that they will. I mean, I have a really hard time giving it to them, just because I feel like C9 actually, like you put up the comment that they're actually able to adapt if they have problems in the first series, but I don't think that C9 change very quickly as a team. Okay. So I think that will continue to kind of be their issue. Even in Gauntlet, I've already said this point. I think previously the Magic Gauntlet last year,
yes,
a lot of the stuff that was in their favor was just like lane swaps going away, and suddenly you could win lanes standard. And I think C9 have still played really well and really successfully with that. So to me,
high in your team as well.
To me, like their lack of adaptation is ultimately the thing that kind of holds them down from winning LCS. So.
What do you think about FlyQuest's chance of a magical run through the gauntlet? Okay, not looking good.
Sorry, I'm just laughing because I thought about the 2015, right? That's going to be the girl that everyone is going to draw, of course.
Who knew Shyvana worked as a jungler? Turns out it doesn't, but okay.
I wouldn't give it to you, but I don't think I would have given it to that Cloud9 team either.
No,
so
no one would have.
No one would have.
Yeah.
So
what's the situation? Like, if Envious wins their playoff series, it's just over, and you don't get the gauntlet spot?
Yeah, then we have like a 4-month off season where I have no idea what I'm going to do. But if Envy loses, then we play in Gauntlet in like 1 month from now, I believe.
Okay.
It's still a really long time. I think if we make Gauntlet, we have like a decent chance of making it, actually, because I think give our players like a ton of motivation. This is like as motivated as you could possibly get.
Okay.
Give us like 3 weeks to just boot camp as hard as possible, and no one's gonna know what we're playing or like how we're playing or our new styles or anything like that.
And who are the other teams expected to be in theory?
Well, all of them would be the playoff teams. So whatever team loses, so it'd probably. I don't actually know exactly. I think our first match is either versus C9 or Dig.
Okay.
And then after that, whatever teams lose.
Yeah, I would guess that C9 and TSM would go through points and winning, theoretically, because they were the final, and IMT weren't even playoffs, so yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how the point system works, but maybe if IMT makes it to the finals, they'll be in through points. All I know is that Summer Split, you get a lot more points than Spring Split.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, that's one of the factors, obviously, is that it's very different if C9's the team waiting in the final of the Gauntlet or Immortals. Like that, in theory, which one would you rather have of those two? Like, I mean,
Immortals.
On the one hand, C9's they've got the experience, right? You want Immortals?
Yeah, I think as a team, we play worse versus C9. There's like a mental block or something. So I would rather play against Immortals and every other team pretty much. C9 and TSM are the two teams that I feel like we, as a team, play worse against.
Are C9 are very good in scrims? They seem like the sort of team we should be.
We haven't scrimmed C9 in a long time. I think when we were scrimming them last season, we scrimmed them a decent amount, and we actually did surprisingly well versus them, from what I remember. Keep in mind, like, our scrim result record is probably like a 25% win rate. So when I say we did well, we probably went like 3-3 versus them for the day. Okay,
you got to 30 minutes, and they were like, well, pretty good, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
From here on out, we're all winners, guys. I love you all, no matter what happens.
No, this guy is trolling. He picked Evelyn, and then you play it on stage. So.
Do you have any concerns, Kelsey, if like Immortals has to play in the Gauntlet? Like in the regular season, yeah, they've looked really good. All the changes seem to have benefited them. The coaching even looks good. Do you worry about them as like a series team though? Because obviously it's clear that best of fives are very different to best of threes.
I think that if it's the case that they have the same problem this split that they did in the past, then there has to be some weird juju or mental hang-up with Pobelter or something, because the way that there shouldn't be a reason for them to do this again. Like, I think a lot of the stuff for last split had to do with the fact that the way that team was run was very player driven, and the players really thought that like they could play their style, and they didn't believe in, I guess the way Dylan Falco put it was, they don't believe in a global meta, right? So they thought that regardless of, like, there is an objectively, like, better champion to play.
Right. Okay.
So
they thought it was all just based on your own style.
Yeah, your own style and what you were the best at, and you could win through that, is how he described it. And obviously, that could have been his perspective on how it was being played. But in general, it felt like the players like obviously had so much more control of what was being played, and they weren't playing to the meta. So I think that there shouldn't be a reason for that to happen again, right? Like, that shouldn't be the case with this Immortals roster, this Immortals team. They've been playing like fairly meta, fairly standard. In some cases, they've sort of been driving the meta with the Ardent Sensor supports and like introducing these aspects to the meta. So they should be able to play these things that are within this, and then they shouldn't be given like these massive curveballs. Okay. So I think that it's reasonable to expect Immortals to play to their LCS level in playoffs.
Yeah. Okay. Moon, do you actually have an opinion on that topic? Do you think there is at least a range that's like, this is the global meta of what is objectively, no matter what region, these are the better champions, they're the ones that work the best at the moment? Or do you think it should be more individually tailored? What's your perspective on it?
I think it's a little bit of both. And I also think each region has a little bit different of a, every region has its own meta. I don't know, FlyQuest was kind of a team that we all played our own individual things, and then nowadays I think we're kind of going more towards the global meta and just playing what people want us to play, mainly just because when we would lose on like our own champions, it felt like that was the reason why we lost. So we kind of changed our thought process on that to just, at least this way, if we lose on like the meta champions, we know it's like our own fault and that we messed up mechanically or we messed up as a team, rather than like, oh, we picked Shaco and Shaco sucks, so we lost. Is
your coach someone who gives you much kind of freedom on that? Is he someone where he's very open to the player kind of picking what he wants?
Yep. I think everyone on the team that was the problem, is that everyone on the team was like too open to new ideas.
Okay. So that can be a problem, isn't it?
Actually, we started like, because of that, we started bringing on like these sheets onto stage with like our pick ban and stuff like that. I don't know if anyone really noticed, but after the whole like Shaco, we played like Shaco a couple weeks, and then we played like Jarvan mid versus Zed. And after those weeks, last split, we started bringing on this like pick ban sheet, like pretty much explaining exactly what we're going to do.
Okay.
We'd always say, all right, listen to the sheet. If anyone brought up a random idea, they're like, all right, is it on the sheet? No, it's not. All right, no, we're not doing it. So
it's like a flow chart. Like if
pretty
this
much
is picked, then we go to this. As opposed to before, it was just like a binder. Like
I'm
gonna pick this one here.
Oh man, they picked Elise. I think we got to pick Shaco here, guys.
Okay.
So.
And were you a team where? Okay, because in that sense, that's always the tough part. Like it's easy in a general abstract way to say, oh, you know, in an ideal world, a player would have a lot of freedom about what he'd pick, you know, because he might have a good idea. But the obvious reason why I asked as to why whether the coach was involved in that is because if the coach is going to get judged on whether you win or lose, it's pretty hard for him to design the comp and to know where you're going if he doesn't know at least some aspects. You know, he has to have at least a few fixed in place, you know, and then know what options he has off that, you know. Is it tough to balance that out?
Like, what do you mean? Like, I feel like when you suggest, for us at least, if I suggest a new champion, I suggest why I think they're good. Like, for example, actually, I probably won't say that right now, but for example, when Shaco was really good, or when I thought Shaco was really good, I said basically this champion has like a 56% winner in solo queue, and if Shaco has a really high winner in solo queue, he's probably a pretty good champion. And I listed off.
and then
Shaco's had a lower winner in solo queue. He's had like a 48% winner or something.
Because only you idiots play him, yeah.
Yeah.
Historically, of course.
So I was like, all right, this champion's probably pretty good. And then I suggested like what I want with him and like the champions that I need to play Shaco, pretty much. And like the matchups in the jungle that I prefer for that. And I played like 20 or 30 games of Shaco in solo queue. So
I like your caveat. When Shaco was good, when I thought Shaco was good.
Yeah, exactly. He's learned. He's learning. The AI is updating itself. That makes me wonder if I wonder if top Koreans do that, because you know sometimes every now and then Faker will just like play Katarina or something. I wonder if he's like, coach, have you seen it in solo queue? Look, when it gets up 3 kills, you know, it kills the whole game. You just kill the bot lane over and over and over again. What if I did that in a real game? He's like, can't argue with that, Faker. You have got the numbers, mate.
Looking back, I'm pretty sure those Shaco games should have gone better. Like, I think if I played like 10 or 20 more games of Shaco, like those games would have gone really well. But
that's the ultimate, by the way, that's the ultimate destructive experimenting there. Like, the first few times I did it, you have to understand, guys, it didn't work because I have to do it more. If you let me do it like 10 to 20 times more, I promise you there's wins in there. You know, we're coming out laughing at the end of it. They'll all be laughing now, but in the end, we'll get the last laugh with Shaco. And also, let's be real, it's also fun to win games on Shaco just because it mad triggers the opponent like 10 times more, right?
I feel so confident when I'm on like a shitty champion because I'm like, man, if I can beat you on like Evelyn or Shaco, like I can beat you on anything. So actually, like if I play Evelyn or something, I actually play a lot better just because I feel so confident.
Okay. You think Evelyn's a shitty champion?
Right now, yeah. Right now she's really bad. I think last split there was like a couple weeks where she was okay.
I was
playing her. Yeah. I was playing her a decent amount then, but I think right now she's like terrible.
Quaylove is still playing it.
I played it once, yeah, and I tried it a couple times. I don't know. I mean, I think she was good.
Now?
She was good recently before the Cinderhulk buffs when people were playing Gragas. I think she was pretty much the only good matchups that she had in that meta was versus Gragas. So I tried that a couple times, and it's a really good matchup because Gragas farms so slow. But now that Cinderhulk is so cheap and so OP, you can't do anything pretty much. But the Eve rework is coming soon.
Okay. What do you expect from that?
Well, I play tested it, so it's actually like insanely fun. I actually think it's a really good rework. So I'm really excited.
It's good.
Did they fundamentally change the champion law?
I can't say anything else.
Okay, well, that means yes, because we've gone from it being complete shit to it's going to be really good and he's playtesting. So that's all I needed to know there. You gave the whole game away. Right. What about when you go into the playoffs, a positive of having players where every single player on your team has won LCS, been through tons of these sorts of things before, is I notice players like that, it actually doesn't even matter what the form of the team is. Because they've done it in the past, they always think to themselves, no, we could get back to that position again, we could win this, we could win this match. Are you as confident as them, do you think, going into do you have to kind of win some games first and then you'll feel confident? What's your kind of mentality going into the gauntlet? If you indeed get there, obviously.
I honestly feel most confident when I have nothing to lose. So, like, if the odds are against us, that's when I feel most confident. So, I actually feel really confident going into Gauntlet if we make it.
Interesting. Okay. What do you think the vibe of the rest of the team is?
Right now, it's hard to tell. Right now, like I said, our practice is like off and on, and it seems like most people aren't too focused because it seems like everything is so far away, and it's not even guaranteed that we're in the Gauntlet. But I think if we do make Gauntlet and we have those like 3 or 4 productive weeks of practice, I think everyone will be really have really high expectations for us and be really confident. But if our practice is bad, like it has kind of been historically, then people probably won't be that confident.
So you're saying probably not?
Honestly, no. I honestly think like going into Gauntlet like that, this is it. Like this is Worlds. Like this is everything that like we've worked for. So I think honestly, if there's ever a time where our practice will change, it's now.
Is the Gauntlet the week after the final of LCS?
I think so. It should be, right? It's in 1 month from now, I believe.
Okay, right. Well, I mean, that's the interesting part I always find about the Gauntlet as well, is that you obviously have teams playing there, the ones at the bottom, where you might not have seen that team play for a month and a half. Like, it could be a ridiculous amount of time they haven't played a game. And that's like saying, can a team change from week 1 of LCS to week 10? Well, obviously, right?
I could have mastered Shaco. And in these next 4 weeks, I could master.
He's putting in a lot of work on this Shaco narrative, isn't he? Okay.
I feel like he's still holding on to it a little too much. Yes. I mean, this could be the turning point where he goes back to his teams. Remember the Shaco thing? I think I can still. This is going to be the key to the Gauntlet.
Give me a couple of weeks and I got.
Well, here's the thing: it would be a genius play if you just kept talking about Shaco all the time in this episode. And here's the thing, right? All you have to do is win 1 game in the series, because at that point, even if it's not actually a good champion, if you can win 1 game, they might actually ban it, and therefore you just got the ban advantage. So that's all you have to do. Isn't it worth it to get 1 ban advantage?
Don't you think because I'm talking about it, like people are going to think, oh yeah, he's trolling? But
no, in reality, reverse psychology. Yeah, exactly. You're tricking him, right?
Actually, a funny story, when we played versus TL, the first game of last split, I messaged their coach. I'm really close with their coach, David Lim. Okay. I messaged him the night before, and I'm like, yo, you got to watch out for Ghost Stormers Kindred. I'm playing it right now. I'm going to pull it out tomorrow. And then he was like, oh, haha, you're so funny. And then I pulled it out in LCS the day after.
Yeah. That's baller. That's a good story. Did you win the game?
Yeah. Nope, we lost.
See, that's where the story... It was awesome until that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. If the end of the story was, and then we won the game as well, and we all laughed about it.
I don't take any blame for that game.
Okay. It was your fault. You had the right plan. Again, it could have worked. If you get like 10 or 20 more games, come on.
Yeah, probably. Probably.
Yeah, who knows? What do you actually think? Obviously, the weird part about this split is the fact that there's this weird like no man's land where people have played like promotion matches that might not mean anything, and people are like, well, even if we're in LCS still, are we going to be in LCS next year? Because even the deals that are done there are all done behind closed doors and no one can publicly reveal them. Although some of them, if you look at people's responses and reactions, you could make guesses, put it that way. What do you think about the world of LCS next year? Because if we have a world where there's fixed spots and everyone's in a franchise, do you buy into the narrative, okay, that some of the owners gave when they were trying to push as to why it should happen, that this will actually take pressure off players? Like now when you're playing the game, the idea is, you're not going to get relegated, so it's more like, how am I doing this week? And if I go onto the bench, I can still get back in the lineup. Is that something you're thinking about at all?
I'm thinking a lot about franchising. I think in a sense, it does take pressure off players, but it also adds pressure because if you have actually a really good academy team, then if you play bad, the other person's going to take your spot. But you'll still be in LCS somewhat. You'll still be on the team, so it's less pressure in that sense. But I think there will be more swaps up and down. I think franchising isn't going to do much short term. I don't think like much will change for me personally or for the other players, for example. Short term, I think maybe 2, 3, 4 years down the line, it'll be a lot different. But right now, I expect most teams to take the academy team kind of as a joke, just because I don't think there's that many good players in NA. To have 10 teams on, or 10 players on 10 different teams. Yeah. So I think, you know, the top teams will have like solid academy lineups, but other than that, honestly, I think everything will pretty much be the same for the bottom 5 of the standings.
How do you feel about some of the substitutions in LCS so far? Because recently there's been the criticism that we aren't really training like active subs in NA LCS. We're just kind of taking a sub on if we feel like this guy, we're having trouble with our main lineup, and then we'll replace this guy with this in-house person eventually. And that's kind of how subs have been treated. Do you think it'll be different from the academy team, or will the academy team just be kind of there because you're supposed to have one?
I don't know. Like I said, I think a couple teams will take it seriously. Like I assume TSM is going to have a really good academy team, and they're going to have a lot of pressure on their main starting lineup to perform. Otherwise, they'll get replaced or temporarily benched. But I think, you know, bring it down to some of the lower teams that don't have as big of a branding, they're not going to be able to find 5 good players. So that's just how it is. There's just not enough good players in NA for the 3/5 rule to have a really good academy team. So I think most people will just sign players. From what I understand, actually, I don't know how much I can say. From what I understand, they haven't figured out if they're doing it like online or in person. So I assume a lot of teams will just, like, if it is online, just hire like players. They'll stay in their house, they'll practice every now and then, and they'll play online every weekend.
The reserve systems haven't worked really well in LPL or LCK because especially in the LPL, the teams just kind of felt like they were forced to do this, and none of the players really cared about it because they weren't necessarily playing in the main league, so they just kind of goofed off. And so I'm wondering, like, what measures will be put in place for NA to be different.
Yeah, I think it's kind of on Riot to do something that makes teams take it seriously.
Especially because the part that doesn't really make as much sense about it is, like, here's the core concept that I don't think translates to League of Legends specifically, is in every single game I'm aware of that's a traditional sport that uses subs, you basically either, like, except for rare instances where there's an injury and you have to sub for that player, usually the sub still plays in the game. Like in basketball, hockey, whatever, they play a certain amount of the game, and oftentimes they even play with other subs at that point in the game. So there's a team component, and you're still practicing for something, and it's a job. So what doesn't make as much sense in League to me is, in theory, the teams that should be able to use subs the best are actually the teams that have the most money, which typically are the best teams. But actually, if you look in almost any league around the world, that's the team least likely to make a substitution, because what they've used that money for is to get the best starting 5 they can for this split. And so they're going to go through any problems by going, right, well, we've got, you know, the mentality is, the paradigm is, it's got to be these 5 players. Like, we're not just going to give up on this, you know, Korean mid laner we brought in, even if right now the guy in our challenger team might be better for this week, you know, because they're thinking, right, well, down the line, that doesn't really help us if the guy at mid lane improves a little bit and one day could be in the team, because we want to get this Korean mid laner good when the playoffs comes, you know. So unfortunately, I feel like at the moment, I'm not sure how you would fix this. It's hard to figure out how you could do it, but I feel like that's the disconnect. I can't really see a world in which you have what you're kind of talking about here, Kelsey, which is real sub, a guy who actually does play, say, a third of the scrims, and therefore you have an idea how you'd play around him. And I think in a perfect world, as I was saying, if you were the richest team, you'd have, for example, 2 junglers, and they'd have a different style of play, and you'd play a bit with each of them, and then either you'd rotate them based on the opponent, or, for example, say one of them just isn't a tank jungler and the Cinder Hog patch hits, then he can either be relieved by the other guy or he battles for his spot. You know, I feel like still feels like that's a long way off. I don't know what they'd have to change. Can you come up with any kind of concept that you could do to make that work?
Well, that's Riot's goal with, like, making the academy league is, well, at least now you have your subs playing and scrimming, and they're playing in their own league. Whereas now, like, challenger teams and LCS teams are separate, and You can't really bring up players from Challenger. I just think short term it's not going to do anything. To be honest, I think it's really just like a long term, like 2-3 years down the line.
Yeah.
I think that's also what Riot's goal is let teams bring in players, let them practice, let them improve, and see what talent there is in NA. Because I think honestly, if a lot of players are given chances, they can prove themselves. But it's just really hard to give them chances when there's only 50 spots in LCS.
Sure. What do you think, Kelsey? Do you have any ideas you've come up with as to how it would actually work? Because as you said, it hasn't really worked so far in League of Legends, right?
Yeah, it hasn't really worked. I think part of the issue is that teams get, like, synergy ends up mattering a whole lot. So
Sure, yes.
when you start subbing in players, especially in a role like jungle, like the example you mentioned, and you have the player specifically designed to play a different style or different types of picks, then it will end up changing the entire dynamic of like how the team wants to play the game. And so it's hard to adjust to that on the fly. So the amount of work that you have to put into making a system like that work consistently, like be effective, I think kind of is not worth it right now because of all of this stuff. Like you have games every week, so you have to focus on like preparing for these matches. The patch changes every 2 weeks, so you have to focus on like understanding how to adapt to this patch. So adding in that extra element, which is why I think even teams like SKT that have arguably used subs the best excuse they've given us is, well, this guy is the team atmosphere was bad after we lost this game, so we needed to change something, and we brought in this sub who we've trained, and we've trained him in a similar way, and he plays similar things. And so I think that that's almost been the best use of subs. And
Plus, yeah. Unfortunately, I also feel like, especially with the Koreans, there's an element that will never translate over to the West, which is that sometimes there's Korean teams where you've seen, I mean, famously, Peekaboo was a great example. You'll have a player who's a sub who actually is a sick player, and yet, even though at a period of time he might only be a sub and never get in the official games, that guy will never just get up and go, you know what, I'm not just going to sit here being a sub and never play. I'm going to go to another team and be on, the 7th best team and show how good I am. They actually will just, because they're Koreans, they will really think, no, like my duties to my team, and this is the team I'm on, and I have to keep practicing, and maybe one day I'll break through and I'll be able to play. And so it's pretty hard to get that sort of like undying loyalty and really that kind of like mentality where you think of yourself, no, I'm just a player for SK Telecom and I'm the sub. Because I think in the West, I mean, you look at almost any of these teams, I think most players, unless it was the option of like be the sub for TSM and you really might get to play, I think most of them would be like, I'd rather be on the 7th best team, at least be a starter, I think it's hard to get out of that individualistic mindset, which is just the way Westerners think in general, I think. And I don't think it's necessarily wrong, it's just different,
Yeah.
I think if anything, actually, the funny thing is, I think actually franchising might hurt in that respect, because then you'll never get that guy to be the sub for TSM. If you say, well, if we've got franchising, we can't get relegated, why don't I just be the starting jungler and get paid more and play for whoever the 7th best team might be? Envious, perhaps, depending on the world we live in. Who knows if envious what should be. Actually, that's something else that's interesting is, you'd think that they should actually, in theory, announce fairly soon who all those franchise teams are. Because even though in theory you have Worlds and all the rest of that stuff to go, the deals must be done at this point in time for most of those teams. You don't think so?
I think they aren't announcing until after Worlds, right? So
yeah. I just don't know what's like private. From what I heard, it's like a couple months from now where they're announcing it.
Right.
Yeah, it's the same.
I think the proposals were sent in like a couple of weeks ago, right? So I don't think they're finished. I think they got like way too many proposals to be finished.
I think they got a surprising amount of applications. So.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Right, at the end of the episode, Moon, do you have a final message for everyone?
Man, I got to do this again. Thanks to all my fans. Thanks to all the fans of FlyQuest. We suck, but we're doing our best to practice and try to make a run through the gauntlet. That's pretty much it. Thanks for supporting me, and thanks for supporting us.
Do you have a favorite LPL jungler?
No, not really. Not really, no.
I mean, it's not that the
junglers...
It's not that the junglers are like particularly good or stand out. They just do weird things that you can apply. And
they all just do really weird things and like really creative things. And I'm like, man, is that good? I'll try it out. So.
Okay. I personally like Swift because he can be a really good player and an asshole, and they don't ever remove him from his team.
Exactly.
I feel like every team should run that way. And on that note, we end the show.
I'm Kelsey Moser, and you're watching Thorin's YouTube channel, where no sandbagging goes unscrutinized.